Hello, welcome to the first Collaborate, Educate, and Participate meeting for the 26-27 school year. This was an initiative that I started last year during the 25-26 school year. We have quarterly meetings that is just an opportunity to be able to share with parents and educate parents, work together with parents to be able to support student growth. And so thank you for joining today. I am Paige Woodhouse, the Director of Special Education for Caston, Eastern Pulaski, and Pioneer School Corporations. Also with me today, I have Emily Harvey from Pioneer and Jennifer Scott from Caston School Corporation. And I believe that Susie Schultz is also joining us as well from Eastern Pulaski. But we're going to go ahead and get started today. Today we're going to discuss some statewide assessments, and within those statewide assessments, what that looks like for our students, what that looks like for special education students, and what accommodations look like during those assessments. And then I'm just going to provide you some overall special education reminders. So that's the goal of this CEP parent meeting. If you have topics that you would like us to cover in the future, please feel free to share those directly with me. I do know that we have some topics already planned, but we have some openings and would like to really meet the needs of the parents during this time. So the first thing is, I feel like here at school we do a lot of testing, and a lot of it has been new and sometimes not always well understood by families. But the state has what's called iLearn checkpoints. And so as you hear your students coming home talking about iLearn checkpoints, or you hear staff with in-case conferences talking about iLearn checkpoints, these are short computer adaptive benchmark tests that are given 3 times a year for Indiana students in grades 3 through 8th grade. The purpose of these checkpoints are to help teachers spot learning gaps, help teachers adjust instruction, and the results come out as below, approaching, at, or above proficiency. Now, one of the biggest things that we constantly have to remind teachers, families, ourselves, is when we look at these iLearn checkpoints, they're administered 3 times a year, but they are not assessing the same things. So each checkpoint is assessing specific standards, and it's a tool to help teachers see, have the students mastered that standard? So a student might be proficient in the fall checkpoint, but then at the winter checkpoint, they are not proficient. It's not that they've lost those skills, it's a whole new set of skills or a whole new set of standards. And so we really can't compare from checkpoint to checkpoint. We just have to be able to look at the data that we get from that checkpoint, and are the students mastering that checkpoint? And if not, are we providing some interventions or additional supports in order to close those learning gaps? Emily, Jen, or Susie, do you have any additional information you would like to share regarding those iLearn checkpoints? Okay. With those iLearn checkpoints, we then have the iLearn summative assessment. And the iLearn is equivalent per se to what, has been done for many years. Some of us remember iStep, some of us remember the iLearn. This is the summative assessment that is administered in the springtime. It is part of the state accountability test. So it measures student achievement and growth based on their grade level academic standards. And iLearn's real purpose is to fulfill state and federal accountability. And so they administer iLearn, and they use that as their accountability measure. It does provide diagnostic data for the schools to support instructional choices. The schools use that data to look at if they need to adjust their instruction, or they need to address their curriculum. They need to address the depth of knowledge that they're assessing throughout the school year to best prepare students. During this assessment, students receive a 4-digit scale score, and those scale scores fall within a proficiency level. And when we look at the iLearn summative scores from last spring, those scores have not yet been released. They will be released this fall. You also see there kind of the breakdown, and we think traditionally of iLearn as 3rd through 8th grade. And that is correct for English and math. But we also have 4th grade and 6th grade students taking science. We have 5th grade students taking social studies. And then there is also a biology and a U.S. government. And so when we look at our high school students, they would take that biology iLearn or that U.S. government iLearn the year in which they're enrolled in the class. And so that differs for some students. Some kids take biology in 9th grade. Some of them take them in 10th grade. It just depends. So when we look at all students, they take iLearn unless a case conference committee has determined that they should be on alternative assessment. And this is a decision that is not taken lightly. This is a decision that requires a lot of discussion, and the state has released criteria for when a student could be on alternative assessment. And that alternative assessment is called IAM. And schools are only to have 1% of their student body on IAM. And so the majority of all students are taking the iLearn checkpoints and the iLearn summative assessments. We also have iRead, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion about iRead, and this has changed over probably the last 5 years if we really look at it. It used to be an assessment that was only done in 3rd grade, but it has changed. Now our students begin taking iRead in 2nd grade. It is a state-required computer test designed to measure foundational reading skills. So they're assessing phonics, vocabulary, and basic comprehension. And students first take this assessment in March of their 2nd grade year. Once they receive a passing score, they do not need to take it again. But if they do not receive a passing score, they will be able to take the iRead assessment in March. I say May. It's typically about the last 2 weeks of May or right at the end of the school year. And then also during that summer session in June. Every year until the student earns a passing score. And this has been a big change because previously, if a student earned a good cause exemption as determined by their case conference committee, they would not need to continue to take iRead. And that has since changed. And the good cause exemption exempts a student from being retained in 3rd grade. It does not exempt them from continuing to take iRead. So students will begin taking iRead in 2nd grade, and they will continue to take it up to 3 times a year through 6th grade until they earn a passing score. You have a sample iRead score sheet there for you to view. That's what it looks like when you as a parent get that score. We also have the state requirement. I talked about iLearn being 3rd through 8th grade, but our high school students have a different high school requirement. And so our high school students, the SAT is the graduation requirement exam. And all students are required to take the SAT during their junior year unless the case conference committee has determined that they are eligible for IAM. And so once again, only 1% of our testing population across the district can be on IAM. Otherwise, all juniors would take SAT. When we look at the PSAT, this is a practice SAT. And It is a district decision, but most districts will take the practice SAT, the PSAT, in some combination of 9th grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade. And the PSAT is a fall test, typically occurring in October, and it occurs during the school day. Those 11th grade students take SAT during their March testing, and it is during the school day as well. And many of our districts use that SAT test day, and only the juniors testing will come to school. But that is a requirement for graduation. We are going to talk about accommodations, but it is very important that when we look at our PSAT and SAT accommodations, a case conference committee recommends accommodations in the IEP, and these are submitted to the college board. And ultimately, the college board determines what accommodations are approved based on the recommendations in the IEP. And sometimes the college board approves different or additional accommodations, or they don't approve the accommodations that are in the IEP. And so we always like to remind parents that the case conference committee absolutely decides what accommodations a student needs. And we put those accommodations into the IEP, and those accommodations are good for iLearn and iRead, for our daily testing that we do at school, but we cannot determine the accommodations for the SAT. We recommend them, but then the college board approves those accommodations. Now, I'm so happy that Emily and Jen and Susie were able to join me today, because the other area that we really want to talk about is universal screeners. And universal screeners are administered to all kindergarten, first, and second grade students annually. They identify students who may be at risk for not reaching their reading proficiency. And really, when we look at these universal screeners, this is what's helping our schools recognize students that need additional interventions, students who need additional supports, or maybe some different instruction. And this is a corporation decision as to what universal screener you use. And so I would like to take a couple of minutes to hear from our school corporations. And so, Emily, if you could share just a little bit about what universal screeners look like for Pioneer School Corporation.
Sure. We use M-Class Dibbles, and like she said, we give it beginning, middle, and end of the year, and it tests on letter naming fluency, phonemic awareness, phonics, and the phonics part is nonsense words, because that'll tell us if they're being able to sound out the words and decode those words versus memorizing recognizable words. And then it has a word reading section and oral reading fluency in first and second grade, and then the comprehension in second grade only. And then it also has a spelling component and a phonological processing assessment. And then we use that data to determine our learning lab groups, which is our intervention, but also our enrichment. So depending on where they fall on that, we will use those scores. Do you also want to know our math universal? Yes, no.
Sorry, yes, that would be great.
Okay.
This is brand new this year.
It is. We have not used this one. Indiana was given a choice between two, and Pioneer chose Forefront, the USNS screener, and that is given 3 times a year. When it's given at the beginning of the year, it's all one-on-one. And I should have mentioned that the Dibbles is also given one-on-one with the teacher. So each student has a minute for each assessment that's given one-on-one. But the same with the math, the Forefront, it is also an interview-based assessment that's given with the teacher and the student. And I really don't know a whole lot about it because we just started it this week. and we're getting the data back. So we'll be looking at that and deciding how we're going to divide up the kids for interventions for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jen, can you please share a little bit from Caston School Corporation, how you guys administer and utilize universal screeners?
Yes, we administer the same screener that Emily was just speaking about. We also have the M-Class Dibbles 8th edition screener that we give to all of our K to 2nd grade students. This is administered by the teacher, like Emily said, in the classroom. Very brief, short assessments that are given to give us the data that we need to determine if students are at risk of any reading difficulties. We use that data then to make our groupings for intervention within what we call tier 2 instruction, which would be just extra support within the grade level classrooms, and then also to determine which students may need additional tier 3 intervention support that they would get from me in my classroom. Emily did a great job explaining each of those assessments, and I think that's what I would like to say about it as well. She covered most of what I was going to say. So thank you, Emily.
Wonderful. Susie, on behalf of Eastern Pulaski, can you talk about your universal screeners?
I'm Susie Schultz. I'm the instructional coach at Eastern Pulaski Elementary. We too utilize the Dibbles assessment as our reading universal screener. I will piggyback on everything Emily said there. We administer that in the same way that they do. The only thing I would add there that maybe she didn't mention is it does flag students who have early characteristics of dyslexia. So we keep very close watch on that as well. And in the math area, that is brand new to us this year, but we are utilizing a screener called iReady for our math universal screener. And it will be also administered 3 times a year. The math will cover areas like counting, basic math computation, finding patterns, solving problems, charts, money, time, spatial, geometry type things. So it covers a wide range of mathematical skills. And again, that'll be 3 times a year. And we will be notifying if we see students at risk and then providing interventions moving forward. So that's about all I had to share.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that is so important for us to remember is when we look at these universal screeners and the iLearn checkpoints, this is very much a tool that the school utilizes to guide instruction and use that data as they share. These universal screeners are 3 times a year. And really, we're looking to see student growth. Sometimes we have a student who comes in and, our kindergartners with letter identification and no letters at all. Mm-hmm. And if we're still at no letters at all at the middle and the end of the year, that's a concern. But if we're making growth and we're showing progress, maybe we're not where we want a kindergartner to be at the end of the school year, but they made growth and progress, and they're showing that the interventions and the supports that they were receiving were beneficial to them. And so all of this data that the school is collecting is intended to help us guide our instruction and provide the students the support they need in order for them to make growth. We've talked about, and from a special education lens, we talk about accommodations, and many times when people begin talking, they interchangeably use the word accommodations and modifications. And I just want to clarify, accommodations are tools or support changes in the learning environment that helps a student access the exact same grade level curriculum as their peers. It can change how a student learns or how that student is tested, but it does not change what they are expected to learn. So a very simple accommodation is if we know a student has difficulty reading, we may read aloud to them the math problems because we want to assess their math knowledge not if they can read the math problem in order to do it. And so they're still doing the same exact grade level math, but they just have it read aloud to them. If we're looking at changes how they learn or how they are tested, sometimes we have students who they are tested one-on-one, or they're tested in a small group, or they're tested verbally because their paper to pencil skills just aren't there. They're not able to get their knowledge out. But if we ask them questions, they can display mastery of that knowledge. And those would be accommodations. Accommodations can be provided anywhere. And I think this is a huge reminder for my families with IEPs. Just because a child has an accommodation doesn't mean that they're always going to go to the special ed room to receive that accommodation. General education teachers can provide accommodations and will provide accommodations to students within the general education environment. And so we just have to make sure that those accommodations are provided. It doesn't determine where they are provided. Accommodations are determined by the case conference committee. And so when we have those case conference committee discussions, we're really looking at what accommodations or what do we need to change on how the student learns or how the student is tested. And so, is that providing a calculator, or is that having things read aloud to them, or is that having an alternate indication of response? Maybe they have a word bank. It's not changing what the expectation of their knowledge is, but it's just changing how they share their knowledge. And those decisions are determined by a case conference committee. So no matter what we're talking about, whether it's I Learn, whether it's I Am, whether it's SAT or I Read, when we look at our standardized assessments, those accommodations are determined by the case conference committee. Now, typically, when we look at universal screeners, we don't provide accommodations initially at those universal screeners because we want to be able to see what can the child do and then go from there. And so there are times that when we look at those universal screeners, and one of those specifically is, we've talked about all of these are 1 minute. And if we have a student who just has no letter naming knowledge at all, but the teacher's going, I know they know their letters, we may take that timing component off and start tracking, do they know their letters and can they share their letters? They just can't do it in a timely fashion. And so our universal screeners many times are with no accommodations initially so that we can see where the students really are and what they can do, and we'll go from there. But our standardized testing accommodations are determined by the case conference committee. Before I switch gears, I want to give Susie, Jen, and Emily another opportunity. Is there any additional information you guys would like to share about any of our tests or, assessments, data that the school is collecting in order to support students?
Paige, I think you mentioned that we are measuring growth. And so we utilize the progress monitoring that goes along with the Amplify assessment or the in-class assessment for DIBELS. So every month we're going to be giving that with our students to be able to check, and some of them will be receiving it every 2 weeks, depending on what level of intervention they're receiving. So we are monitoring it closely to make sure students are achieving that growth. And I did fail to mention, we are also using Forefront for our math screener this year as well.
Wonderful, thank you. So from a special education lens, I just want to remind parents, I shared this last year, but in order to ensure confidentiality, maintenance of records, and record keeping, we ask that teachers and parents use approved communication modes. And so when we talk about that, we really want you to communicate with the teacher of record, either through school email, school phone, or school communication tools. Some of our schools are different from school to school, whether they use Class Dojo or they use Remind or they use Aptogee Rooms, and that is specific to whatever corporation you are in. What I really want to reiterate and ensure is those denied communication strategies. You know, especially in our small communities, many times we know families and we know our teachers, but we really do not want to be utilizing personal cell phones or personal emails or other social media from Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, the like. For communication, for the privacy of and confidentiality of your child and your child's records. And so, although you really know this teacher, don't send them a text message or a Facebook message. If you do need to send them a message, hey, can I get in touch with you? Or what's the best way to get in touch with you? But don't share all of the information. So when we're looking at our communication, we ask that you use school email, school phone, or a school approved communication tool. I do have there a note in your child's backpack with that exclamation point. You know your child. And so just be cautious. If your child is going to throw that note away the minute they get on the bus, probably not a good choice. Or if you're, whatever that may look like for you. So if your child can take a note back and forth, that is great, but not all of our kids can. So if you do send a note in your child's backpack and you don't get a response from the teacher within 24 to 48 hours, you should probably use another form of communication because it's very likely that maybe they did not actually get that note out of the backpack. I want to remind families to stay connected. I want to be available and accessible for you. So I have my phone number and email address. I also have our special education website there. You can access our special education website. There are different resources and tools. These meetings are posted on the website along with previous meetings that we've had. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out because we want to support you and support your students. Thank you so much for participating today. Go ahead and mark your calendar because we will be meeting again on November 20th, February 26th, and April 30th. And so our parent meetings will be those 3 days. This recording will be posted in the near future, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and supporting your students, and wanted to just share that information regarding state required testing and accommodations through those tests. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.